All right, listeners, today we're going to deep dive into some seriously fascinating stuff. Dangerous cities in South America.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, we've got a mix of sources for this one. YouTube videos with those like classic top 10 most dangerous lists.
Right.
And then we have some firsthand accounts from travelers who've actually been to these places. So,
Yeah, cool.
yeah, getting ready for an adventure, are we?
Sounds like it.
Let's make sure it's a smart adventure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's super interesting that you've included these sources that give us both like the hard data
Yeah.
and then those like personal perspectives. You know, it's one thing to see Caracas at the top of a list,
Right.
but it's another to like hear about what daily life is actually like in a Venezuelan barrio.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting is that we get to see both sides of the coin.
Totally. So why don't we kick things off with that top 10 list from Learning Canteen?
Okay.
Caracas, Venezuela takes the top spot as the most dangerous city in South America. And I'm curious why it consistently ranks so high on these lists.
Well, the video highlights its extremely high homicide rate, and it also mentions gang violence and kidnappings.
Oh, wow.
But to really understand why we need to look beyond just the crime statistics,
Okay.
Venezuela is facing, a deep economic and political crisis.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, creates an environment where these kinds of dangers can flourish.
That makes total sense. So after Caracas, we have two Brazilian cities battling it out for like the second and third spots.
Yeah.
Feira de Santana and Natal.
Right.
What's the story there?
Both have shockingly high homicide rates, according to Learning Canteen.
Wow.
And this is where things get really interesting because we also have Fortaleza, another Brazilian city, coming in at number 4.
Okay.
And it's a major economic hub,
You think?
You'd think that would correlate with lower crime, but that doesn't seem to be the case here.
Yeah. That's surprising. You usually hear about like Rio when it comes to danger in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
not these other cities.
Right. It seems like a city's reputation doesn't always reflect the reality on the ground.
Exactly. And like a perfect example of that is Cartagena, Colombia.
Yes.
Statistically, it might not be as high on that danger scale as some of these other cities, but the YouTuber Austin Holloman paints a very different picture.
Right.
He actually felt more unsafe in Cartagena
Interesting.
because the danger felt so unpredictable.
Yeah, he actually uses that term, unpredictable danger,
Yeah.
especially when it came to tourists.
Right.
He had some wild stories about encountering sex workers
Oh, yeah.
and then being targeted with scopolamine,
Oh, God.
that drug that basically makes you a walking zombie
Right.
so they can rob you.
Scary.
And he also mentioned these like elaborate schemes where entire groups work together
Oh, wow.
to lure tourists into dangerous situations.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
It really highlights how danger can be so localized even within a city.
Mm.
You know, your level of risk can change so drastically depending on where you are, what time it is, even how you present yourself.
Absolutely. And he also talked about greeno pricing, which is basically just inflated prices for tourists.
Right.
Not as dangerous as scuppling,
Sure.
but still a sign that some people are looking to exploit visitors.
Yeah, it makes you think, could tourism actually be contributing to the problem in some places?
It's a good question.
Yeah, maybe attracting the wrong kind of attention and creating incentives for these scams and crimes to flourish.
Yeah, that's definitely something we should explore further. But
Okay.
before we get too deep into that, let's move on to Medellin, Colombia.
Okay, yeah.
It's worked really hard to shake its reputation as like the home of Pablo Escobar.
Right.
But Austin still had some pretty unnerving experiences there.
Oh, yeah. I remember that story about him being followed by suspicious people after leaving a 5-star restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And then to top it off, he later heard that same restaurant got robbed by a motorcycle gang.
Oh, my gosh.
It's crazy to think that even in like a seemingly upscale area, like that you're not necessarily safe.
It's true. And it seems like motorcycle-related crime was like a recurring theme in Medellin.
Yeah.
He mentioned seeing a lot of motorcycle gangs.
Right.
And even heard stories about tourists being kidnapped right off their bikes.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if there's like a specific reason why motorcycles are so prevalent in the city's criminal activity.
That's a good question. It could be a combination of factors. Maybe it's the ease of maneuverability, you know, in crowded streets.
Yeah.
The ability to make a quick getaway, or even just like the sheer number of motorcycles on the road. It
Right.
definitely warrants further investigation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, what about Brazil?
Yeah.
Austin visited Salvador, and
Right.
while he felt relatively safe there, he did mention one incident that stood out.
Okay.
He saw this group of teenagers using like coordinated tactics to pickpocket people on the beach.
It just goes to show that you can never let your guard down, even in a place that seems so relaxed and tourist-friendly.
Right.
These petty crimes might not be as dramatic as like armed robberies or kidnappings, but they're still a concern.
Absolutely.
And they can really ruin your trip.
For sure. And then there's Natal, which, according to Learning Canteen, is notorious for its sophisticated ATM theft techniques.
Wow. So we're seeing a range of dangers here,
Yes.
from petty theft to organized crime and everything in between.
It seems like danger isn't always about overt violence.
Right.
Sometimes it's more about like the undercurrent of tension,
Yeah.
the feeling that something could go wrong at any moment.
You hit the nail on the head, and that brings us to Venezuela.
Okay.
Specifically, those videos about life in the barrios of Caracas.
Right.
The contrast between like the beauty of the city and the stark poverty and danger was really striking.
The poverty was particularly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
One video showed people lining up for hours to buy basic necessities.
Wow.
Like bananas.
Bananas.
And the cost of those bananas compared to their average income was just mind-blowing.
That's
It really highlights the devastating impact of the country's economic crisis on everyday life.
for sure. And then there's the presence of gangs and colectivos.
Yes.
Each controlling their own territories and engaging in a range of activities, from robberies to much more sinister things.
Absolutely.
You mentioned colectivos.
Yes.
Can you explain what they are and how they fit into this whole picture?
So they're essentially armed groups
Okay.
that have a very complex relationship with the Venezuelan government.
Interesting.
Some are seen as like pro-government forces, while others operate independently.
Oh.
They often control resources and provide services within their communities.
So they're kind of like a government?
Yeah, in a way,
Okay.
but they can also be incredibly dangerous
Right.
and are known for their involvement in violence and extortion.
It's a double-edged sword.
It really is, and it's not just the collectivos.
Right.
The videos also mentioned other types of gangs, like the Prains, who operate from within prisons,
Wow.
and even ex-military groups involved in smuggling.
It's a complicated web of criminal networks.
Yes.
And power struggles.
That sounds terrifying.
It does. But amidst all this hardship, I was struck by the resilience and resourcefulness of the people. They showed community support networks,
Yeah.
shared food packages, and even talked about a hospital run by a collectiva leader.
That really speaks to the human spirit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even in the most desperate circumstances, people find ways to help each other create these pockets of hope.
But it also raises the question, is this level of community support like a testament to their strength? Or a symptom of a government failing to provide for its people?
That's a great question, and one that I think we need to grapple with as we continue to unpack the complexities of these cities.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just acknowledge the dangers.
Right.
We need to understand the underlying factors that contribute to them.
For sure. Yeah, it's a complex situation, that's for sure.
It is.
And as much as I'd love to keep unpacking, these like socioeconomic factors, we do need to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Your safety.
Definitely.
After hearing all this, even I'm feeling a little intimidated.
Yeah.
What are some practical steps we can take to minimize those risks while traveling in these cities?
You're right. We can't just gloss over the practical aspects. And I think the golden rule, no matter where you are, is to blend in.
Okay.
Avoid anything that screams tourist, like flashy jewelry or carrying around large amounts of cash.
Yeah, makes sense. Don't make yourself an easy target. What about just being aware of your surroundings?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust your gut.
Okay.
If the situation feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to remove yourself, even if it seems rude.
Right.
Remember that story Austin told about being approached by that guy in that dark alleyway in Salvador? He got bad vibes and he quickly walked away.
Yeah.
And sometimes a little awkwardness is better than putting yourself in a potentially dangerous situation.
That's a good point. Speaking of getting around, what about transportation? Any advice on navigating that safely?
Do your research before you go.
Okay.
Figure out which areas are considered safe.
Right.
What the transportation options are, stick to reputable taxi services or ride-sharing apps, especially at night.
Okay.
And try to avoid traveling alone in unfamiliar areas, particularly after dark.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about the political climate in some of these countries?
Right.
Venezuela, for example, has been through a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
Are there any, like, specific precautions we should take in a politically charged environment?
Yeah. It's always smart to be aware of the current political situation and any travel advisories or sanctions that might be in place.
Right.
Um, those situations can change quickly.
For sure.
So stay informed and just be extra cautious.
Okay.
Remember, you're a visitor.
Right.
And it's important to respect the local dynamics.
I do remember reading that the U.S. has a travel advisory in place for Venezuela.
Yeah.
Definitely something to keep in mind.
For sure. And don't just rely on government advisories.
Okay.
Look to other travelers like those YouTubers we've been discussing.
Right.
Their firsthand experiences can give you insights you won't find in any guidebook.
Totally. Their stories definitely bring the dangers to life.
Yeah.
In a way that statistics just can't capture.
Right.
It's like having a virtual travel buddy giving you the heads up on, like, potential pitfalls.
Exactly. Speaking of those videos,
Yeah.
did you notice a recurring theme in the Venezuela ones?
Besides the poverty and the crime, I noticed that guns seem to be everywhere.
Yes.
It's like they were just part of everyday life.
You're right. Venezuela has a very complicated relationship with firearms.
Yeah.
The videos mentioned that while gun laws have tightened, the number of guns in circulation has actually increased.
Wow.
And sadly, a lot of those guns end up in the hands of criminals.
That's really scary. And those gangs, those colectivos, they seem to operate with a level of impunity that's hard to comprehend.
It really speaks to the breakdown of law and order in some parts of the country.
Yeah.
In certain areas, gangs have essentially filled the power vacuum, creating their own rules and systems of justice.
And those kidnapping stories, wow.
Yeah.
That's a whole other level of danger.
It is.
Especially for foreigners who might be seen as easy targets for ransom.
It's a heartbreaking reality. And the videos suggest that a lot of this crime is fueled by economic desperation.
Right.
When people are struggling to survive,
Yeah.
they become more likely to take risks, even if it means engaging in criminal activity.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It is.
Poverty leads to crime,
Yeah.
which further destabilizes the community, making it even harder to escape poverty.
And it's not just Venezuela. We see similar patterns in other cities on those lists.
Yeah.
Like Feira de Santana in Brazil, where drug trafficking has fueled violence and instability.
It's easy to get caught in the crossfire even if you're not directly involved.
Right.
Just being in the wrong place at the wrong time can have devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the importance of awareness.
Right.
Doing your research.
Yeah.
And understanding the dynamics at play in these cities before you even set foot there.
Okay, so let's talk about safety tips again.
Okay.
But this time, let's get specific.
Okay.
Let's say you're in Cartagena and you find yourself being approached by a sex worker.
Okay.
What's the best way to handle that situation?
Be polite, but firm.
Okay.
Clearly decline any advances and avoid engaging in conversation or following them to another location.
Right.
If you feel pressured or threatened, remove yourself from the situation immediately.
Okay.
And don't hesitate to seek help if necessary.
Good advice. Now, let's say you're in Medellin
Okay.
and you suspect someone is following you.
All right.
What should you do?
First, don't panic.
Okay.
Stay in well-lit, populated areas.
Uh-huh.
And try to make your way to like a shop or a public building.
Right.
If the person continues to follow you, contact the local authorities immediately.
Okay.
It's always better to err on the side of caution.
And what if you're in Rio enjoying a day at the beach and a group of teenagers approaches you?
Again, maintain a safe distance and avoid eye contact. If they approach you directly, be assertive and tell them you're not interested.
Okay.
If they persist, try to attract attention from others or move toward a more crowded area.
These are all really practical tips.
Yep.
It's all about being prepared, being aware, and having a plan in case things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And remember, even in cities with reputations for danger,
Right.
there are always ways to mitigate risk and enjoy your travels responsibly.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between adventure and safety.
So true, but it's also important to remember that these cities are more than just their crime statistics.
Absolutely.
They're vibrant, complex places with rich cultures, stunning landscapes, and resilient people.
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the negative,
Right.
but it's so crucial to acknowledge the positive too.
For sure.
And maybe that's the tree adventure, right?
Yeah.
Not just visiting a place,
Mm-hmm.
but really understanding it, engaging with its complexities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about seeing like that whole picture and appreciating that resilience and beauty that exists alongside the challenges.
Exactly. And speaking of complexities, it makes me think about the role of tourism in all of this.
Okay.
Could tourism, if done responsibly, actually be a force for positive change in these cities?
That is a really fascinating question. On the one hand, tourism can bring in much-needed revenue,
Yeah.
create jobs, and help boost local economies.
Mm.
But on the other hand, if it's not managed carefully, it could also make existing problems,
Yeah.
like inequality and exploitation, even worse.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, for sure. Remember that Greeno pricing that often talked about in Cartagena?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of suggests a system that takes advantage of tourists rather than creating genuine economic opportunities.
And in those Venezuelan barrios, it makes you wonder if an influx of tourists would actually help or hinder those communities' efforts to build a better future.
That's such a good point. Would it create more opportunities or just open up new avenues for exploitation?
Right.
Would it empower locals or just turn their lives into a spectacle for outsiders?
Yeah.
Tough questions.
Yeah. Tough questions with no easy answers.
Yeah.
It seems like the key is responsible tourism.
Yeah.
Being mindful of our impact as visitors, supporting local businesses, and engaging with the culture in a way that's respectful and beneficial for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And maybe by choosing to visit these cities,
Yeah.
by showing a genuine interest in their stories,
Right.
we can help shift the narrative, challenge the stereotypes, and contribute to a more nuanced understanding of these incredible complex places.
It's not about shying away from the tough realities,
Right.
but about using our awareness to foster understanding and hopefully inspire positive change.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about being a conscious traveler.
Yes.
One who embraces the world's complexities with open eyes, a curious mind, and a healthy dose of caution.
I love that it's not about fear-mongering, it's about informed exploration. And hey, maybe that's the true adventure, right? Not just seeing a place, but truly understanding it.
Yeah.
Engaging with all its messy, beautiful contradictions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, listener, as you plan your South American adventure, remember that knowledge is your best tool.
Yes.
Do your research, be aware of your surroundings, and most importantly, go with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
Safe travel.